Listen, I thought a good place to start. I do a lot of research in advance of these conversations.
Yeah.
I've never gone down a deeper rabbit hole or had more fun learning about a program than I did with yours. And I thought I knew what West Point was.
Yep.
I barely knew the first layer. And I
Oh,
thought for
absolutely.
we've got people tuning in from all over the world. Do you mind just maybe explaining what West Point is?
Sure. So a lot of people, when you mention West Point, they really don't know. West Point is the preeminent. I'm sorry,
All
the
good.
preeminent leadership institution in the world,
Yeah.
not New York State, not the East Coast, but the world. So the young men and women that come to West Point, including our players, um, are going to graduate and lead this nation's sons and daughters in, you know, in a much bigger um, uh, venue than being in a game of hockey or football or lacrosse. So, as coaches, you get to play a role in helping to shape and develop your young men that you coach um, to be these future leaders. And because when they graduate as second lieutenants in the Army. And as a result of coming to West Point, they're committed to 5 years of military time. And after those 5 years, if they want to keep going in the military, absolutely. Or if they want to get out, what they'll do is they'll put a resume together: education, United States Military Academy; work experience, officer, United States Army.
Wow.
And I can tell you, Aaron, that I know I can speak for my dad, who was here for 36 years, my brother Rob, 18, myself now, it's been 33 as head and assistant. We have never ever had a player call us and say, "Hey coach, can you help me get a job?" Like, there will never be a door that will close on you because you graduated from West Point. All they do is opportunities present themselves to you. So um, West Point, I mean, it's a challenge. It's 4 years of rigorous academics. Um, then you have the military piece. Then you have the physical piece. Um, and you're going to get knocked down at West Point. You're going to get knocked down a lot. But you know what West Point teaches you? It teaches you how to get back up. And so I've had a lot of guys in my office um, over my time as a coach who have come in some days and been like, "Coach, I don't think I can do this." Like, and you know what? They stay, they grind it out. And again, on the last day, there's never, ever been anybody who has said, "I regretted graduating from West Point." So I think the best things in life are the ones that you have to work the hardest for, right? And,
Totally.
right. So that's when I get to see our players on the last day, on their graduation day, and they walk up this ramp and they salute the president of the United States, and the president hands them a
Does the
diploma.
president, is that true? Does the president show up
Yeah,
every?
so
Oh
so
my
it,
God.
it
I didn't know that.
it's on a cycle. It's usually the president, the vice president, or the secretary of the army, and it just rotates. So yeah, I mean, but when they put that white cylinder in your hands, obviously a very proud moment for a coach. Um, but you're set for life. You are set for life.
And I think it's really important to point out, and again, I was learning this, that when you say set for life or that no doors close, it's not just in the military arena. It's in all facets of life. So um, when we look at Vinny Viola, the owner of the Florida Panthers,
Yeah.
he attended West Point. When we
Yes.
look at Bill Foley, the owner of the Vegas Golden Knights, I read this. He made 40 grand his senior year at West Point trading on the stock market. Ended up opening up a whole new career that you're producing A++ humans in all walks of
Yes.
life.
No, so we bring in young men here on recruiting trips, and usually once we get them here, uh, they're blown away by the place. Like you can feel the history of and tradition of West Point when you walk around the grounds, right? Like um, I used to run all the time, but now I walk. But I walk down through the main area and I see statues of Grant, MacArthur, Patton, Eisenhower, all people that went to school here. So there's a saying at West Point: much of who we learn about in history were taught here at West Point. Um, but you talked about Bill Foley and Vinny Viola. I mean, um, the Golden Knights brought the Stanley Cup here a year ago because Bill Foley wanted to bring it back to his school, and now the Panthers, Vinny Viola, is bringing the cup back here because
Saw
he
that.
wants to bring it back. And so, but when we get young men here now, I know a lot of these kids go to schools and the coaches tell them, hey, come to our school and you will have a chance to play in the NHL. Now, what I tell kids, I said, hey, you come to West Point and you can own an NHL team that wins Stanley Cups. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's pretty amazing to have the last two Cup winners, owners, both be graduates of West Point.
I'll also point out, fun fact, I learned that Bill Foley, when he was looking to name his NHL club in Vegas, he wanted it to be sort of tied back to West
Yes,
Point, hence the colors, etc., the
yes.
logo, which is, I mean, I think speaks volumes. I had a bit of a visceral reaction or feeling reading about your student athletes,
Hmm.
because I was reading and I'm like, I don't think I could do that. And
Yeah,
I was blown away, um, by just the level of commitment. Like, the one thing that stuck out to me is that, again, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but I think it's fair to say that in some circumstances, student athletes can maybe cut corners. I don't get the impression there's any corner cutting at West
no,
Point, and I
no.
love that your players. The term that's thrown around there is warrior scholars.
Yes,
Can you maybe paint a picture of what a day in the life looks like for a warrior scholar?
sure. I think back on my days when I went to Brown University, great academic school, but a lot different than West Point. Um, you know what? These young men and women, they're up here every morning. I can hear the cannon go off in the morning at 6:30. They have breakfast probably seven
Did
ten.
you
They have
say a
breakfast.
cannon goes off?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The cannon goes off right down in the main area, and you can hear the bugle playing and playing reveille, and they raise the flag at that point. But the cadets are up. They have morning formation at like 7 o'clock, 7:10. They go into the mess hall and eat, and they will feed 4,000 cadets in 25 minutes. They go in there,
Every day.
they eat every day, every day. And then they will go to class in the morning. Like our guys, most cadets here have six classes, uh, including including a phys ed class. Now, when I say phys ed class, I'm talking about boxing or combatives or survival swimming. So when they go to that class, like we've had guys, you know, get injuries because boxing class or combatives where they're going one on one with somebody, right? Um, and then in the afternoon, they will have formation for lunch again. Everybody, 4,000 cadets in there. And our guys will have the last hour off, which means they don't have the last class, I think, which probably starts around 3:10. So now our guys come up to the rink. They get here. we try to start practice 3:45, 4 o'clock. We go till 5:30. They go across the street to lift. Um, they come back. They get treatment. They go down below. They eat. They have uh, evening study period. So they're preparing for, doing all the homework that they have. And 11 o'clock, it's lights out.
Like
And
everywhere on campus.
yeah, yeah. And then it starts up again the next day. So there's a lot of structure,
Yeah,
which, you know what? I like when we recruit kids here, um, they understand, hey, every kid has a dream of being a Division I college hockey player, right? So
sure.
they're excited about that. If they do their homework, they understand that West Point is academically one of the best schools in the world. Um, and I always tell kids, you don't want to compromise your education for hockey because unless you know you're going to play in the NHL, like where you go to school is really important. Um, so guys understand that, but then the military piece. We don't have one kid in our room who grew up saying, "I want to be in the army," right?
I was going to
But
ask you about that. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't even worry about that piece because all these kids have been playing this team sport since they're 8 years old,
Hmm.
and at each level they've gone, mites, squirts, peewees, midgets, juniors. They've learned what it means to be on a team, right? Commitment, uh, self-sacrifice, team first mentality, accountability, all those same things are going to make them successful army officers. So the military piece, I don't even worry about it. Like I know that our guys, because of the experience of being hockey players and then the experience of coming to West Point, they will be great leaders. They will be great leaders. And hockey has a lot to do with that.
When you're going through the recruiting process, and I think that's so interesting that aspirationally that a lot of your players don't have visions of being an army officer or serving in the
Yep.
armed forces. But I think it goes without saying that for every player that is successful there's probably a lot that might not be successful there. In the recruiting process, what sort of tells or perhaps questions might you ask to evaluate if a player is going to be successful at West Point?
Yeah. So I always tell people it's easy as a coach to go watch a junior hockey game, right? And pick out who the best players are, right? Like we can all do
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
We can all do that. But at West Point, it's so much more than that. So number one for us, what we have to know is who are the students, right? Right. Like you have to be a good student to get into West Point. And then I will, as well as the other coaches, we will dive into the character piece of the people that we are trying to recruit, right? Because you have to be a strong character person to come to West Point. You have to have leadership potential. You don't have to be the best leader yet, but you have to be somebody who has leadership potential, who can come here and maybe you come here as a blob of clay, but by the time you leave, you're this well molded sculptor that people look at and go, wow, right? So for us, it's a lot more than the hockey piece. I always call it the it factor. Like, so you can't see, but I wear two KIA bracelets, right? They're killed in action bracelets. And so two of our players that were killed in action in Afghanistan. One was First Lieutenant Derek Heins, class of 2003, was killed in Afghanistan 2005. The other is Major Thomas Kennedy, who was class of 2000, was killed in 2012. And you know, I have a lot of responsibilities at West Point, but I feel one of the most important responsibilities I have is to make sure that their legacy lives on. right? So to be able to talk about them, and certainly to be able to talk to them about you and all the viewers, I mean, that's who they would want their story told. But I'm telling you this because they had the it factor. Like when I met both of those guys after the games where I went to watch them, TK, Major Thomas Kennedy, he
Yeah.
was playing at Salisbury School, right? Good prep school, good hockey program. And I went down and met with him after the game. And I just knew, like, firm handshake, look me in the eye. Like, um, everything was yes sir, no sir, like, I mean, thank you, like, I just walked away from there. I remember at our staff meeting the next day, the my brother was the head coach at the time.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I said, you know what, he's got the it factor. Like, he's made for West Point and West Point is made for him. And same thing with Heinze, Derek Heins. So I went to watch him play St. John's Prep in Massachusetts. Good hockey program. And honestly, the first thing you notice about somebody is their physical size. And I saw him come out of the locker room. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I just drove 3.5 hours to watch. Like, he looked like he was like 5'6", right? But when that puck dropped, you can be small and play big, or you can be big and play small. He was small, but he played big, right? Like, I'm getting goosebumps right now, like thinking about him. He scored a couple goals. He set. So afterwards, boom, I'm down there and comes out. And if I thought he was small without skates or with skates, he was smaller without skates. But again, everything I said, hey, Derek, like, couple great goals. He's like, coach, my line mates did all the work. I'm like, okay. I'm like, hey, I love how you kill penalties. I'm a PK guy. Like, he goes, coach, like, our assistant coach does an amazing job. So every time I tried to pay him a compliment, he gave it to somebody else. And I knew then there's that it factor, right? And neither of those guys proved me wrong. Like, they came here, they were good hockey players, but they were great people. They were great leaders, and so I think for us, like at West Point, and I would like to think for most programs, like, character is really, really important. And so I'm blessed to be around um, amazing young men and women here at West Point every day, every day. Like, before my feet hit the ground, I can't wait to come in to the office, right? I don't even call it work. Like I love when people tell you that they've worked somewhere. Oh, I've worked there 30 years,
Yeah.
12 days, 16 hours. I'm thinking to myself, they mustn't like their job. Like, because I don't know how long I've worked here, honestly, like, because of the people that I get to be around.
No kidding. Well, I'm going to share a story of my experience with one of your former players.
Yeah.
So I started coaching in the BCHL when I was 20 years old. Had no business coaching junior hockey at the time. Was just incredibly fortunate. So they still have it. Do you remember the Lakeland Super Camps? Or
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
global.
Global.
Pardon
So
me.
I know who you're going to talk about here.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm 20 years old,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Okay, you're going to go to this global thing." I'd done it as a player, and you get your schedule and you're with all these different teams. So you go and you introduce yourself to the players. They come on the bench and you're just trying to have conversations and
Yeah.
keep it light. And there's this kid and I'm 20 years old and I'm talking to this kid and I'm like, oh my God, like he has his, what together. He's so articulate, clearly so bright. He's organizing everybody in and around the room. And I put his name down. I remember asking him where are you playing next year? He's like, I'm going to Surrey or no, going to Langley, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, so I write his name down and I just, coach against him, pay attention. Wasn't a superstar by any stretch. And then I see that he commits to Army. And I'm like, why is he going to Army? Like what's he doing there? Um, and then you look where he's at now and it all makes sense. And it's Bryce Hollweg. and who's
Holly.
now, I believe, he is is he the president of the Panthers? What's his
So
role?
he's the COO
Yeah,
of the Panthers. But as soon as you
yeah,
said, like, I'm going to tell you about somebody, I knew right away, like, you were going to be talking about Holly. Like,
yeah. Just a like incredible human.
yeah, like, there's somebody who has the it factor. Like,
Yes.
I know when my brother Rob went out to see him, and he came back and said the same thing. And when he came to campus for a visit, you just knew um, that he was made for West Point, and West Point was made for him. Holly's a really smart guy. So when you went back to thinking, like, why is he going to West Point?
Yeah.
Um, Holly had always had the ability to look down the road, and he is actually coming back here this week with the Stanley Cup. Like,
Oh,
and
no way.
yeah, he's going to drop the puck here in our home opener with the
Awesome.
cup, and um, but he's one of the few, maybe the only uh, players to come through here and have a letter on his jersey for 3 years, and to be able to do that at West Point. Our room is filled every year with leaders. Right, every single one of the people in our room has leadership qualities, but the fact that he wore a letter as a sophomore um, just kind of tells you that he's built a little different. And, nothing would surprise me with Holly. Like, someday he's probably going to be the GM of an NHL team, or who knows? Like, he
No
could be
doubt.
running the NHL. Like
Yeah.
nothing would surprise. But there is a perfect example of, you can come to West Point and you can be whatever you want to be. You can be the top general in the whole military, or you can be an owner or a president of a National Hockey League team. Um, so uh, I'm just so proud of Holly and what he's been able
So cool.
to accomplish. But I'm not surprised, and
Yeah.
um, so uh, it'll be great having him back here at West Point.
No kidding. No kidding. So, Brian, your dad, Jack, started
Yep,
coaching at West Point in 1950. In 86, he passes the torch to
yep.
your brother Rob. Just looking back at my first reaction was, man, like the Monopoly games at the Riley household must have been fierce growing up. But
The knee hockey
oh, I
games
bet,
in the
yeah, yeah, there
basement
must have been
was
a few
fierce.
holes in the drywall
That's yeah,
in the
yeah.
basement.
When my
Yeah,
dad would yell down, "Knock it off!" That's when we knew, like, we better
yeah.
tone it down.
What were the conversations like at the dinner table growing up?
So, growing up, there's four boys, one girl, right?
Yeah,
Um, we lived in the rink, like, a Saturday morning, well, a Friday night, we'd have house hockey league games. Now, the rink at West Point was 234 feet long. Like, it was the longest rink, 234 feet. Like, it was the longest rink in North America. And so we were playing cross ice games back before cross ice was even cool. And then our house league games, the fire hose was across the red line, so it was half ice. But we would play Friday night. Then we would have general skating from 8 to 10, and then Saturday. Like, I would wake up even before cartoons came on Saturday, and walk up to the rink because I'd play in a Pee Wee game, and then I was able to play with the Bantams too. So Pee Wees, Bantams. Then my dad's team would his junior varsity team or freshman team would play at 2 o'clock. Then my brothers would play at 4 o'clock, the West Point Juniors, and then my dad's varsity team would play at 8 o'clock. So, like, a Saturday at West Point, that was the best. We just lived at the rink, and um, it was an amazing childhood growing up here at West Point. Um, we were able to jump on the ice with my dad's teams and practice. When I was not big enough to practice, he would say, all right, put your skates on. And the practices back then were a lot of like scrimmages. Like they
Yeah.
didn't do a lot of, it was 1-on-1s, 3-on-2s, like power plays. But my
Sure.
dad would always tell me, all right, when the play's down the other end, just skate across, just get some skating in. And then eventually we got older and we could practice with uh, the freshman team or the JV team. Um, but my dad was very competitive, like fierce competitor. You know, whether he was on the golf course or in the rink, like a lot of people would see him. He'd lose his mind sometimes on the course or in the rink, and I think everyone assumed, like, man, what's it like at home with him? Uh, but he was awesome. Like my mom and dad were great. My mom kept him in line, so she was the one that behind the scenes kind of made sure we were all grounded and um, you know, I like to think we're good kids and good people, but to grow up at West Point and have all these cadets as kind of your heroes, and then I had three older brothers that I always looked up to and wanted to be just like, and
Yeah.
uh, then my sister, she probably turned out to be the best hockey player of the bunch, but
No kidding.
um, it was, yeah, she's played hockey at St. Lawrence. She's in the Hall of Fame there for, she played soccer, softball, hockey. Um, my brothers, Jay went to Harvard, played hockey. Mark went to Boston College, played hockey. Rob went to Boston College, played hockey. So I always wanted to be like them. And so just a great childhood, having the opportunity to grow up here at West Point.
Well, your dad spends his whole career there, and I don't know this
Yeah.
for a fact, but just based on that, I mean, he coached the Olympic team and had
Yep.
so many accolades that I would assume that at some point there would have been opportunities to perhaps move
Yeah.
on, and
Yeah.
certainly in your brother and your career, I would assume the same. But
Yep.
you didn't. You stayed, and in doing research for this conversation, the term servant leadership
Yep.
kept coming up, and not just with the coaches, but for the players as well.
Hmm.
And I'm just curious, how does that get defined in your locker room?
So, well. First of all, like that, that's a great like lead in. My dad, right? So he was a great player at Dartmouth. Um, at the time, Red Blake was the athletic director, Dartmouth football coach. He comes to West Point and is the athletic director and football coach here when in the heyday of the Army football, and actually right now they're obviously doing well, but he had my dad come down and he wanted to talk to him about coaching here at West Point, and my dad said, uh, "Coach Blake, I'll do it for a year," and so that 1 year turned in for 36 years. And so, as a kid growing up in our basement, on one wall was my dad's West Point teams, all of his teams. On the other wall was my dad with picture with his captains. And then on another wall was the Olympic wall with pictures from the gold medal. And so, inevitably, people would always ask me, "Hey, does your dad have a gold medal?" I'm like, "Yeah, do you want to see it?" And of course, they'd say yes. So I'd go up to my mom and dad's room. I'd open my dad's top drawer, lift up his t shirts, pull out the gold medal, bring it down, and show whoever wanted to see it. But all those times, I used to always think, like, why does dad stay at West Point? Like, here's a
Yeah,
guy, coached the Olympics, was a great player. He's from Boston, played in the Olympics. Like, why not BC or BU or Northeastern or Harvard? Like, why does he stay? And now having sat where he sat, I know why he stayed. Like the opportunity to be around the people that we get to be around every day makes this the most rewarding and humbling. I don't even call it job, like
yeah,
opportunity in all of sports. So um, I think it's our players come here, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, right? And um, it takes a special person to um, put everybody before themselves, right? And that's what they do here. And I think as coaches, my dad, my brother Rob, and myself, um, just again to have the opportunity to help shape and develop young men to be future leaders in our country. Like I there's nothing more rewarding and humbling. Like I remember when I had an opportunity and I told my brothers, I'm like, I think I'm going to take this. And my oldest brother Jay looked at me and said, "Hey, good luck telling Dad." And I'm like, "Oh God, yeah," because um, this place just meant everything to him. And so, uh, as I've been here now, I understand why. Like, honestly, I still pinch myself when people introduce me as a head coach at West Point or I'm like, really? And here I am getting ready to wind down. And I'm like, I still can't believe that I've had this opportunity. Never would I
Yeah.
have imagined this.
Well, you know what? I believe when done right, coaching forces us to be the best version of ourselves. But I was thinking about this in your case, in your brother's case, in your dad's case, that um, to walk into that room and earn the respect of your players, knowing who they are, who they're going to become. Once you've done that, I'm like, it must be really hard to go to navigate away from that because you would just have to be. I mean, pressure's a privilege when it's framed correctly,
Yeah.
and I can only imagine. I mean, you talk about getting up every day and the excitement, but I would have to think that there has to be this other side of it where it's like, hey, like I can't be 95% today. I got to be 100% every single day because maybe some locker rooms wouldn't see through it, but my locker room will for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I also want to make sure this doesn't slip through the cracks. Is it true that, you talk about that gold medal that was in your dad's t-shirt
Yeah.
drawer? Is it true that back when he coached the Olympic team, the coaches didn't get a gold medal and he maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know that he
No,
somehow that,
I've got a great story with
yeah,
that. So yeah, he wasn't supposed to have a gold medal, and his
amazing.
general manager at the time was Jim Claypool, who was from Duluth, Minnesota, and he called my dad and said, "Hey Jack, they want the gold medal back." And my dad, from what I hear, from what my dad told me, he said, I told Jim, I said, "Hey Jim, you can tell them that I threw the gold medal in the goddamn Hudson River. There is no chance they are getting this gold medal back."
That's so
So,
good.
so
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So I mean, I don't know if he was supposed to have it, but he has it.
You had
Like
it.
so. But back to your point, like walking into the locker room, you're right. You can't fool these guys. And I'm going to tell you something. I was almost fired here. It was probably 10 years ago. And you know what? I probably should have been fired. And to your point, like I was trying to fool our players. Like I was going through a lot of things and um, your players can see right through it, right?
Yeah.
And I had to have a couple hard conversations with our athletic director. And at the time, it was Boo Corrigan, and we talk all the time. He's the athletic director at North Carolina State now. He gave me a second opportunity. And the last thing he said to me when I walked out the door, he said, Riles, don't prove me wrong. And um, but it just brought me back
Mm,
to what you said there. Like as coaches, like they have to feel your passion. Like especially here at West Point, like this is what they live for. Like they go through what they go through every day just to get the opportunity to come up here and this is their passion. So they have earned the right to make sure that the coaches that are up here, um, you know what? and I'm getting excited. Like
Yeah.
the coaches that are here are excited for them and are committed to making them the best players that they can be. Right. So the best the best leadership advice that I ever got, which my coaching philosophy has been based off of ever since I heard this, was I'm sitting around the kitchen table with my mom and dad. I'm a senior at Brown. I'm home for spring
Yeah.
break. My mom says, "Hey, Bry, what do you want to do?" And I remember thinking for a second, what do I want to do? Like, why is she asking me that? Because my brother Jay's a Division I assistant coach at the time.
Yeah.
Mark's helping coach at a prep school at the time. Rob's a Division I college assistant coach. I'm like, come on, mom. Like, I want to coach. And I think I probably let her down because here I am, the fourth son. She's hoping for a doctor or a lawyer. And what do? I'm
Yeah.
coach. And right then and there, my dad looked at me and he said, Bry, I'm going to give you one bit of advice. And I remember like, all right, let me get something to write. And he goes, no, he said, you don't need to write anything down. You just need to make sure that you, as a coach, show your players that you care for them more as people than you do as hockey players. And if you do that, you will create the power of one. And when you have the power of one, you can overcome any obstacle, climb any mountain together, right? So the power of one is that's kind of always been my foundation is showing our players. Like I could walk into our room today and put my arm around every single one of our guys and tell them I love them. Love, not like love's not a word that you just throw out, right? Now that doesn't mean I can't go in tomorrow and put my foot in their butt. Like that's tough love. Like that's about accountability and standards, right? That as a coach, you have to make sure that um, you are holding them to a standard. You are making them accountable. But for me, it's honestly, if you were here today and you talk to any of our players and ask them, hey, does Coach Riley care about you? And if one of them even hesitated, man, I would be horrified. So for me, walking into the room and every day, our guys, they know that they're cared for. They know they're cared for.
I love that. The power of one. That's awesome. You touched on it, Brian. It's your last year. And I was thinking about this too, man. I don't know how many coaches get to call their shot, and
Yeah,
get to go out on
yeah.
their terms. I mean, that's a really unique circumstance. What are your goals for this year?
So my goals for this year is to, you know what, put our team in the best position to win, and at the end of the year, be playing our best hockey. Um, honestly, I when I talked to the administration here, and I knew that Zach McKelvie, my associate coach, was
Yeah.
going to be the next guy. I knew, all right, it's time because no one is bigger than the program. And I could have stayed on, but that would have been holding Zach back, and that would have been holding the program back. Zach is one of the finest young coaches in all of hockey, and he, as a West Point grad, as a former captain, he loves the school, he loves the program. So um, I'm just so happy for him. Like he and I have been together the last 10 years. I coached him. Um, I'm just so happy that it's worked out for him, and I can't wait to uh, sit in the stands and watch Zach and my son Jack's on our staff here,
Yeah.
and just kind of watch them have success because I know they will. And yeah, so a bittersweet moment when I made the announcement, but I know that the time is right. So, and it's kind of strange. Like everything I do, this like it's like I'm reminded it's the last time. It's the last time, and it like I always say the seasons are long, but already this season's flying by. I think this season is going to be over in the blink of an eye for me, and I'm not looking forward to when it ends. That's for sure.
Well, gosh, I can only imagine what you're going to get up to. You're going to need some hobbies, but I do want to just shine a bit of a spotlight on Zach. And it was interesting, before we hit record here, um, it would have been last week. Yeah, gosh, it was like last Sunday.
Yep.
So Troy Ward, associate coach at Minnesota State's a really good friend of mine, and we were doing this clinic at Minnesota State for the Minnesota High School Coaches Association.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
just turned out because the BCHL showcase was in BC, like we get on the plane and I'm in Troy's office. I'm like, hey, when are you flying back? He's like, Sunday morning. We're on the same flight. We got to sit together. It was a real treat. And he was sharing that his son, Taylor, is an assistant coach for you this year. But then he was also sharing that Zach played for him in Abbotsford. And, you know, this was just him, just sharing the story. I didn't tell him that you and I were going to be chatting, but he talked about, he's like, in the American Hockey League, you get, you know, a lot of players through your dressing room over the course of the season. But he said, I get this kid that comes to gets assigned to me, and I start doing my research, and I realized that he played at West Point, signs a free agent contract with the Boston Bruins, but then goes overseas to serve for 2 years
Yes.
before embarking on his pro career. I can't even fathom how many kids would have the wherewithal to make a decision like that. Listen, we talk, I mean, character gets thrown around on this show in our sport
Yeah.
all the time. Like, I'm trying to think of a better representation of character than to make a selfless decision like that.
But there's a perfect example, right? Like I remember sitting in my office, the GM and the assistant GM of the Boston Bruins are sitting there saying, "Hey, we want to sign this kid," um, understanding that he's probably going to have to serve 2 years in the army. So they loved him as a player, but when they were able to have conversations with him, and you just hit the nail on the head, character. Like you want to make sure, like the culture in your locker room is there's nothing more important. So you need to make sure you have the right type of people in there. And when you could have a person like they knew and they spotted it, and they weren't the only team that was trying to sign him, that if they could have a person like Zach McKelvie in their locker room, like that would be a win-win for them. And they were willing to wait 2 years for that to happen. And so that just speaks, I think, volumes to the type of person, and I call Zach Z, that Z is, right? And so, but it also, like when you mention, I mean, here we are talking hockey. There's Troy Ward now. His son Taylor is here now. He coached that. I mean, everything, like the hockey world is so small. Like I can imagine, like all the people that you talk to, you're somehow connected to so many of them now.
It's well, that team, for example, like I had Cale McLean, who was on that staff, assistant in Calgary. Now he was on the show 2 weeks ago. Luke
Yeah,
Strand was an assistant coach.
yeah,
It's such a small world, but I mean, the one thing I've learned about our game is that character attracts character, and
yeah.
the character tree is it's pretty easy to spot. I I found a clip. I can't even remember if it was on YouTube or Facebook or what it was, but it was you mic'd up at a practice. And I love that. Every once in a while teams do this. And man, I think that you can learn so much from listening to a coach in real time when they probably forget after 2 seconds that they even have this little lapel mic on their tracksuit. In your case, you had like the old school sweater and all that. But you made a
I hope
great
I didn't
comment.
say anything bad. I hope I didn't say
You
anything
didn't
bad.
know you didn't. I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
and I wanna just touch on two things
Yep.
that
Yep.
you did say. And the first one is the scene opens and you're skating around the rink. I'm assuming it's at the start of practice. You're talking to a
Yeah,
player. We don't learn who the player is, but you make a comment where you say, half of being good is thinking that you're good.
yeah, yeah.
And
Like I
how,
tell
how,
guys
how do
that.
you, yeah,
No, I mean I tell guys that all the time. Like when guys are struggling with confidence, right? I can't walk into the locker room with a bag of confidence and say, "Here you go." Like here's a bag of confidence for you, right? But what you can do is um, you try to have conversations with them to build them up, and I say that a lot. Half of being good is thinking you're good. So when guys are down or when they're struggling for trying to find confidence,
yeah.
just tell like you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here as a Division I college hockey player if you weren't a good player, right? So and when I say that to guys, that's more of just a reminder for them. Hey, you're a good player. You're a good player, right? And don't ever forget that, and always remind yourself, because once you're telling yourself you're good, then all of a sudden, I think good things are going to start happening on the ice.
No, and I think that's such great advice for coaches, both in terms of how they deal with their players, but think also, um, I mean, I have so many conversations with coaches when, before after we hit record, where they're like, the story is, and then all of a sudden I was in an NHL locker room and I was scared shitless, and it's
Yeah,
intimidating, and I had to produce, their own self confidence. So I think that's great advice. The other comment I wanted to touch on, and it's maybe a little tough to figure out the context, but you talk about the first four, and I believe you're talking to the team about the first 4 minutes of a game are going to be critical. You mentioned the other team's going to come out hard.
yeah.
How important is, whether it's a hockey game or anything that's hard in life, the value in breaking it into small chunks or small steps and just focusing, instead of focusing on the big picture, the ability to focus on what's 6 inches in front of your face.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't go in and as a player, as coaches, be worried about the whole 60 minutes, right? Like um, because I don't think that allows you to have a zoom focus on the task at hand.
Yeah.
And the task at hand for a player is your first shift. Is your first shift, right? And then it's your next shift, right? And if you have that zoom focus every shift, then I think as the game is over, like you will look back and say, "Hey, I had a pretty good game," right? But if something doesn't go your way, I always tell our guys, like don't let one bad shift affect your next shift or your next, because then before you know it, it's affected the whole period, and then you've carried one bad shift around like a ball and chain, and you've had a horseshit game because of one shift at the start of a game. So um, I think like for us, like I tell our guys all the time that like everybody just focus on your first shift. And if that's the case, that usually turns out to be the first 4 minutes, right? And if we can if we can kind of set the tone that first shift for each line, and everybody feels good about it, then that's a good thing. Like, I don't think in life you can worry about things that are out of your control right now. You just need to focus on what you can control, and like you said, what's right in front of you at that moment. And if you do a good job with that, then guess what? Usually things fall in line and fall into place.
Well, it goes back to, what you said off the top here. Is just that, West Point teaches you to get back up and to
Yeah, yeah.
persevere. And, that's, again, I think that's great advice. We all need to hear that
No,
at
no.
times.
Like, I mean, hey, I'll never forget. We had at our coaches convention, Mike Eves. They had a breakout room, and they had all different, probably 4 or 5 different rooms. And Mike Eves was speaking up about how to follow up after a tough season. And I remember going in there and I'm looking around and there's only about 7 or 8 people in there. And I'm like, everybody. I mean, if you coach long enough and if you've never had a tough season, you're really lucky, right? But if you stay in coaching long enough, then you're probably going to have a tough season or two, right?
For
And
sure.
I can just remember listening to him and just thinking, man, there should be a lot more coaches in this room because I know we all hope that everything is going to be perfect and um, sustainability. It's really, really hard. Like so much credit to these teams that get to the top and are able to stay there, but it's a hard thing to do.
Do you know? I just Brian, given that this is your last year, and
Yep,
I'm sure you've done some reflection to this point. I would imagine you're going to do a lot more
yep.
in the future. But in hindsight, is that not sort of part of the fun of this whole thing? Is that it's not great every year, and that you got
Oh,
to kind of
exactly.
ride it, and you got and I love, and I think it goes back to the power of one. That's really probably the only way
Yes.
that you navigate the stress and the pressure and everything else is to say, hey, we got to stick together.
No, and that's a great thing about coaching. Every year is different. Like
Yeah,
like some of these people that have these jobs that do the same thing every year for 40 years, God, I don't I would never want to do that. Like coaching from year to year, it is different. Like you all start off with these lofty goals. Everybody has these goals at the start of the year. Some years you're able to check off a bunch of those. Some years you might not check off one, but it just I think coaching fuels your fire, right? It like every year you come back and say, all right, and
yeah.
when you have that fire, your players feel it, and that's why the start of the years are so exciting. But then I think you learn the character of a team, how they handle adversity, right? Because everybody's going to have some type of adversity. You may get it early, you may get it late, or you may get it the whole year. But you've got to make sure as a coach, you keep those guys pulling that rope, right? You make sure they are pulling that rope in the same direction and hopefully the players, if they feel somebody's not pulling the rope, they tell them pick up that friggin' rope and you keep pulling, right? So you're right. It is exciting. It is exciting every year.
You mentioned the advice that your father Jack gave you.
Yep.
If you were going to get into coaching, you've got two boys. Jack is assistant coach on your current staff
Yep.
at West Point, and Brendan is an assistant to another great coach in his own right, Eric Lang, great
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And what advice have you given your boys when it comes to
So,
coaching?
well, first of all, when I asked them what do they want to do, when they're both at Mercyhurst, and I'm like, all right, guys, what do you want to do? And they gave me the same look I gave my mom, like, what do we want to do? We want to coach. And I remember thinking, damn, really? Like this is what you guys want to do? Like,
Yeah.
but no, the advice I gave them, the same advice that my dad gave me. I said, guys, you make sure you show your players you care for them more as people. And if you do that, then if you care for them more as people than hockey players. And if you do that, you will help create the power of one wherever you are. And that's the advice that I would give to any young coach out there. Show your players that you care about them. Because if you do that, man, they will move mountains for you. And so I'm really happy to, or we'll be happy, and obviously coming to work every day with Jack on the staff and Langer, who you mentioned, like he's part of the family
I would
here. He
imagine.
he, he was on our staff, and to have Brendan there. Um, if you can do something that you have a passion for, then you're really, really lucky. And I know Jack and Brendan both have a passion for hockey and coaching. I mean, it's what they were brought up around. I wish I could take credit for raising them. Actually, it was my wife. She did an amazing job with our three kids. Our daughter Danielle, Danny was a lax player at Merrimack, but they've been around sport all their life, and so I think it's really neat that they're doing something that they love, right? And I don't know if you're going to make a lot of money coaching, but man, to be able to come to do work every day and uh, do what you love to do is really, really rewarding and fulfilling for sure.
Well, it sounds like you're not gonna stop hanging out at rinks anytime soon. I Brian, I'd be curious. I wanted to ask you, like,
Yep.
what's the one leadership lesson that you've learned at West Point that maybe you may not have learned had you not had the opportunity to coach there? And I would also invite you, is there anybody that you've crossed paths with there, be it faculty or through the military, um, someone that probably our listeners aren't familiar with, but an opportunity to maybe shine a spotlight on them?
No, so I am surrounded by great leaders every day, like for the last 33 years, like superintendents here. So superintendents are like would be the equivalent to presidents at other universities. They are
Yeah.
three-star generals here.
Wow.
And I think of General Williams, who's now a four-star general, General Caslin, General Chrisman, like um, just amazing leaders. Boo Corrigan, who's the AD at North Carolina State, Jimmy Knowlton, who's the athletic director at Cal, and people like Dan Gelada, who was one of the highest chief warrant officers here, Mark Ray, special lot, like I could go on and on with people that have impacted my life, and uh, I, I I guess the biggest leadership piece for me is it just comes back to um, making sure that your players know that you really care about them. And so the thing that I will take away from West Point, probably my biggest highlight, it's not a championship. It's not a win over a nationally ranked team or a win over an Air Force. It's an email that I received on August 29th, 2005. 7:30 in the morning, I'm in my office and I look at my computer and I have an email from Derek Heins, who at the time is over in Afghanistan. And he he says to me, he said, "Coach, um, I hope all the new guys are doing well. Do me a favor, tell them to hit the books early because when the season gets going, um, it gets hard." And then he said, "Coach, the last 2 weeks have been the worst 2 weeks of my life. We lost four soldiers to a roadside bomb." He said, "Nothing I've ever done has prepared me to help navigate a team through something like this." And then he talked about my family, and we're both Red Sox fans, so he talked about the Red Sox. And at the end, he said, "Coach, I want you to know that some of the best leadership skills I ever learned at West Point were a result of being an Army hockey player, but even more importantly, from watching you." And he signed it like he always did, Heinze number 7. And when you get emails or text, you're like, "All right, I'll wait." But for whatever reason, I responded right away, and
Yeah.
I said to him, "The new guys are doing great." I said, "Hey, Heinze, if there's ever been anybody who has sat in this locker room that could help somebody get through what you've had to get through, you would be the guy." And I said, "I'm so sorry for your soldiers." I talked about my family. And at the end, like I always did, I said, "I'm proud of you. Stay safe. Love, Coach." And 2 days later, I'm in our locker room and I get my phone vibrates. I look at it and it's Nate Mayfield, who was one of Heinz's teammates. And I said, "Hey, Nate." He said, "Hey, coach." He said, "Did you hear?" I said, "Did I hear what?" He said, "Did you hear about Heinze?" And I was like, I just exchanged emails with them 2 days ago. And he said, "Coach, Heinze was killed last night." And I remember to this day, like just kind of dropping down into the locker stall. I don't know what he said because all I could think about is what am I going to say to his parents? Like, because I recruited him, I was one of the coaches that recruited him to West Point. What am I going to say to my family? What am I going to say to the players? Um, but again, like to to get that email from him and for him to say that, you know what, coach, uh, I am the leader that I am today, partly because of being a part of the program and watching you. Like that to me is, I think, the ultimate goal of what coaching should be to make a positive impact on the young people's lives that we get to coach. And so like I've always said, when I leave here and now I know that my time is winding down, I'm not going to change. Like that email will still be my my most prized possession, my biggest highlight.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. I think
Yeah,
that's
no, no.
incredibly
I mean,
impactful. Um, I want to. This is the thing that stuck with me, and I'd like to finish here if I can ask one more question,
no, I
and
love
that
it.
is
This is
that
great.
you know what? So I probably like a lot of our listeners. When I was a kid, I
Mhm.
watched Hollywood stars, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like that was that's what I associated leadership with, and being a
Yes,
man
yes,
with,
yes,
and
yes.
toughness, and all those things that we aspire to be, right, as young men. And and then you grow up and you become a husband and a father, and your perception starts to change. But in the course of researching you, this one word kept coming up in all of your interview. And I'm going way back. And then I started researching your father, and the same word keeps coming up in your brother. And it's the word humble. Man, if I had a nickel for every time you said the word humble, I'd have a lot of nickels. And so and then, and this is like literally a couple nights ago. And so then I go back and I'm starting to research in West Point and all this. And it became really clear that humility is the culture there, that this is clearly a learned um, characteristic or behavior. And I think it's so counterintuitive to everything we're sort of brought up to believe leadership is.
Yeah,
And I'm wondering
yeah.
if maybe you can just take a moment to expand on the relationship between humility and leadership.
Yeah, and that's, gosh, like when I talk about being here at West Point and some of the names that I mentioned, um, uh, Dan Gelada, Mark Ray, General Williams, General Caslin, like these guys are all tremendous leaders, but every single one of them are so humble. Like the people that I get to rub elbows with here, the officers, for example, we had we have an officer representative who is stationed here at West Point, and every year they give out what is called the Ninninger Award. And the Ninninger Award is given to an officer here at West Point who has shown bravery through actions under fire, right? And one of our officers a couple years ago got the Ninninger Award. And when I heard, I'm like, what? Like you wouldn't even you wouldn't even imagine, like these
Yeah.
guys never talk about like what they do. And trust me when I say, and I'm getting goosebumps here right now, what some of these people have done that are stationed here at West Point, like, oh my gosh. but they would never, ever tell you. They are so humble. And I think that's part of, I just think that's an important part of being a great leader is showing humility, right? Like, um, nobody is bigger than anybody else or more important than anybody else. And I think the best leadership, servant leadership, like you talked about, selfless. Um, our two players that were killed in action, TK, Major Thomas Kennedy, and Heinze, First Lieutenant Derek Heins, if they were here today, if they were here today, they would tell you that, like, they would want their story, like, because they were hockey guys. So they would be so excited to have their story told. But they would tell you this, that Heinze would say what happened to me on September 1st, 2005 really sucked. He would tell you he misses his mom and dad, he misses his brothers, he misses his sisters, his friends, but hold on to the but. TK would say what happened to me on August 8th, 2012 really sucked. He said he would say he misses his wife, Cammie, his twins, Maggie and Brody, his mom and dad, his two brothers, his friends. But each of them would say this: they would much rather what happened on those days happen to them than to any other soldiers. Those are selfless leaders. Those are the type of men and women that I have had the opportunity to be around for the last 30 plus years here at West Point. So, leaders, humble, selfless, like you name it. It's that that's why I've had the best opportunity for the last 30 plus years. I, nobody, nobody has had it better than me.
Brian, this was the best, man. Thank you so much.
No, this has
I
been
really
awesome.
appreciate it. This was really cool, and thanks for just sharing your story and these stories and your player stories with
No,
coaches
I
around
mean,
the world.
I mean, I appreciate you giving me the time. I love what you do. It's great for hockey. The coaches' site, phenomenal. So keep doing what you're doing.